Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of He was a genius programmer who was reborn in another world and got a cheat system to get strong. You can watch the previous part on this channel. I put a link in the description below. Let's continue the story. With a fixed gaze, Alice directed her attention towards the guy after a prolonged exchange of glances. Alice then proceeded to ask the guy to replace her battery. Perplexed and without comprehension, the guy wondered if Alice, being from the future, required recharging instead. In response, Alice explained that her battery was nearly depleted and requested the guy to remove it and place it under the sun for immediate charging. However, Alice cautioned that she couldn't remain close to him during that time. Concerned, the guy inquired about the duration it would take for the battery to charge. Alice replied that it would take approximately 2 weeks if everything went well. As the guy sadly gazed at Alice, he expressed his longing for her. Smiling, Alice asked one more favor of the guy, to ensure everything was prepared for repairing the magic sword. Proudly, the guy assured Alice that he had everything ready and was awaiting her instructions. Using her right hand, Alice projected a diagram, which the guy carefully examined. The guy questioned whether the diagram truly represented the blueprint for creating a magic sword. Alice confirmed its authenticity and emphasized the urgency for the guy to memorize it. The guy then asked if memorizing the diagram would enable him to restore the sword. Alice replied that it was theoretically possible, but she was uncertain about its practicality. Analyzing the diagram, the guy noticed its simplicity, yet it inexplicably gave him a headache. Smiling, Alice compared training one's spiritual power to riding a bicycle, while understanding the sword scheme was akin to driving a car. She encouraged the guy to acclimate himself to it. Grateful, the guy thanked Alice and pledged not to disappoint her. Upon bidding farewell, Alice expressed her anticipation of not seeing them again and wished him success. After Alice disappeared, the boy diligently practiced at home, finding the training arduous. Just the sight of the diagram darkened his eyes. However, he remained committed, motivated by his promise to Alice. The boy sat at the table, consuming bread while his battery charged from the sun on the windowsill. It had been a month since he last saw Alice. The nearby blacksmith, proud of the boy's rapid progress, decided to commend him. The boy was surprised by the blacksmith's praise, as talking during meals was prohibited. Expressing gratitude, the boy attributed his achievements to the blacksmith. Overwhelmed with happiness, the blacksmith believed that the boy possessed innate talent for blacksmithing. The first apprentice concurred, asserting that Shaoan would undoubtedly become a renowned blacksmith. The boy felt embarrassed by the acclaim and averted his gaze, unable to comprehend why everyone wanted him to pursue blacksmithing when he aspired to become a magician. The blacksmith then urged Shaoan to prepare himself, explaining that Knight Stockton would return in 2 months, and the boy needed to demonstrate his strength. Furthermore, the blacksmith disclosed his intention to request the knight to accompany Shaoan to Si City for the novice blacksmith exam, envisioning a scene where everyone admired him. Astonished, the boy attempted to interject, but the blacksmith silenced him. The blacksmith led the boy outside and encouraged him to contemplate what he wanted to forge. Assuring the boy that they would overcome any challenges, the blacksmith emphasized the need to showcase their capabilities. Shaoan agreed, internalizing his teacher's words. Upon returning home, Shaoan retrieved the solar panel from the windowsill and reattached it to his glasses. As he put on the glasses, he thought of Alice and called out to her, hoping she would appear in the white light. However, Alice didn't materialize, causing the boy to become increasingly anxious. Perplexed by her absence despite the month-long charging of his battery, Shaoan suddenly heard a voice. Looking up, he spotted Alice flying on her broom. Alice greeted him and descended to his level. Shaoan expressed his fear when she didn't appear earlier, wondering if something had happened to the teaching machine. Alice responded that she had merely decided to tease him. She then inquired about the rumors of Shaoan potentially leaving for the big city. Shaoan looked at her in surprise, questioning how she knew when she was supposed to be charging. Alice explained that she had read his memories, leaving Shaoan to jokingly label her a stalker and assert his need for personal space. He then proceeded to go practice, but Alice asked him to wait and consider a good opportunity. Confused, Shaoan turned to Alice and asked what she was talking about. Chuckling, Alice replied that once he left, he would find a better place. Intrigued, Shaoan pressed Alice for more information, asking why he should leave for another city at the age of 9. Alice smiled and stated that based on her observations, he was capable of it. She further explained that staying in their current location might hinder his magical learning while moving would provide new opportunities. Advising him to think it over, Alice suggested that if he wanted to study magic, he needed to interact with wizards and show the knight something special to secure his accompaniment. Perplexed by the notion of being special, Xiao-In's face turned pale at the mention of restoring the magic sword due to the headache-inducing diagram. Undeterred, Alice continued to persuade him, highlighting the significance of being a 9-year-old blacksmith and restoring the magic sword in capturing the knight's attention. Alice acknowledged that staying in their current setting was an option if he wanted to waste his life, but if he desired to explore the world, he should strive to achieve his best. Reminding him that he lacked noble status or a powerful wizard mentor, Alice emphasized that his future depended solely on himself. Time passed since Xiao-In last communicated with Alice, and he had now reached the appropriate level of spiritual power required for the blueprint. Once again, he found himself in a space-like realm, having completed the blueprint assembly. Alice, sitting on her broom, observed the system windows. Xiao-In inquired if he had succeeded, prompting Alice to fly over and confirm that he had successfully assembled the blueprint. With a mischievous look, Alice suggested that he try casting a spell using it. Astonished, Xiao-In realized that the blueprint also functioned as a spell. Alice affirmed his realization, explaining that when he was outside, he just needed to visualize the circuit depicted. Stroking his ego, Alice expressed her eagerness to witness his spellcasting attempt. Alice, looking at the system windows, informed him that she wanted to gather as much information as possible because this world was very different from his own. She explained that she needed to create a new database, which required a lot of information. The boy agreed to Alice's proposal and asked her the name of the spell he needed to perform. With a wink, Alice replied that it was called the Sharp Edge spell. Back in the real world, the boy started contemplating the magic scheme. He visualized a magic sword in his mind and felt the spiritual power being absorbed. The sensation reminded him of a constantly beating drum. Suddenly, he saw a white light and felt himself enveloped by blue energy, which he gathered in his hands. Unable to control the energy, a ball formed in his hands, and he realized his spiritual power was about to be depleted. In a burst of energy, he released the ball upwards, creating a hole in the ceiling. The boy was astonished by the destructive power of the spell and contemplated that despite its potency, it would not be useful in battle due to its high consumption of spiritual power. He acknowledged the need to train even more. Finished with his thoughts, he entered the space where Alice rushed towards him, asking about the Sharp Edge spell and whether he liked it. The boy replied that the spell was indeed powerful but too dangerous and didn't suit him. Analyzing the spell, Alice realized it could be improved and asked for some time to show him something incredible. The boy found it hard to believe that Alice could make the spell even stronger. Alice explained that the spell allowed for compressing air into a ball and shooting it out. Looking at the system window with information about the spell, Alice realized that the speed and power of the compressed air were no stronger than shooting a bullet. By compressing the air into a bullet shape, the effectiveness of the spell would be significantly higher. The boy exclaimed with excitement, and Alice agreed with him, noting that the modified spell would require less spiritual power. After a while, the boy activated the spell again and punched a hole in the training board. However, he burned his hands in the process. Knight Stockton, the mentor, had been away for a month, and during that time, the boy's spiritual power had become much stronger. He had learned how to compress air into a bullet, making the Sharp Edge spell even more potent while reducing its spiritual power consumption. The boy continued practicing in the field when he was suddenly called by his first apprentice, isekai'd. Isekai'd informed him that Knight Stockton had returned, and they went to meet him. A large gathering of people had gathered to meet the knight, and the boy realized that it was their duty to show their gratitude. He recalled his father telling him that Knight Stockton was a good lord, and everyone was grateful to him from the bottom of their hearts. A significant number of people reside in these lands, which are characterized by fertile soil. As long as the lord is fair, no one will suffer from hunger. Xiao-In and A encountered their teacher and were asked to approach him. The boys scanned the area and standing on a rock, gazing into the distance. Xiao-In noticed that the lord was accompanied by a group of warriors on horseback, which sparked a momentary desire in one of the boys to become a knight. Xiao-In questioned whether he was willing to give up blacksmithing so easily. In response, isekai'd reassured him that he could become a great blacksmith while acknowledging the appeal of being a knight. Knight Stockton dismounted from his horse, and to their surprise, the blacksmith and the knight exchanged warm greetings, jumping towards each other. After their long-awaited meeting, they embraced tightly and shook hands. The knight inquired if the blacksmith had come out to meet him, and the blacksmith confirmed, praising the knight's remarkable appearance. The knight then presented a sack filled with something, mentioning that it was a gift for the blacksmith. Curious, the blacksmith requested to see the contents of the sack, which turned out to be weapons and armor. After examining the gift, the blacksmith asked the knight what had happened on his journey back. The knight assured him that it was nothing serious. The blacksmith entrusted the bag of gifts to his first apprentice and asked the knight about his duration of stay in the city. The knight replied that he planned to stay for at least 2 weeks. The blacksmith took the opportunity to praise his apprentices and proposed the idea of them accompanying the knight next time. Observing the first apprentice behind the blacksmith, the knight asked if he was skilled enough. The blacksmith confirmed that the first apprentice was already capable of participating in the entry-level artisan exam. The knight agreed and placed his hand on the first apprentice's shoulder, promising to give him a shop upon their return. The apprentice expressed his desire to stay with the teacher, which earned praise from the knight for his loyalty. The knight then noticed Xiao, introduced by the blacksmith as a highly talented boy. This revelation surprised the knight, who crouched down and handed the boy some candy as a token of appreciation for coming, encouraging him to share it with his friends. The knight stood up and asked the blacksmith to introduce the second apprentice. Pointing at Xiao, the blacksmith shocked the knight, who initially thought it was a joke, considering the boy's young age. The knight's words not only affected the boy but also made the blacksmith realize that despite his youth, Xiao possessed abilities on par with the first apprentice. To test the boy, the knight offered him a challenge in the forge, expressing doubt that the boy could wield the blacksmith's large hammer. The knight was astonished by the boy's abilities, unable to believe that such a small child could effortlessly lift such a heavy hammer. The blacksmith smiled in response, and the knight eagerly approached Xiao, examining his physique. The knight suggested that Xiao follow him and learn the ways of a knight, emphasizing the importance of strength as the foundation of a knight's skills. Xiao questioned the knight's sudden change of attitude, as he had previously treated him like a child. The knight firmly grasped Xiao's shoulders and explained that his strength at such a young age indicated his potential to become a formidable knight. Xiao realized that his strength was a result of his morning stretching routine, and he pondered the idea that he could surpass the knight's own strength through practice. The knight urged Xiao to believe in the greatness of becoming a knight, as it would elevate his social status to that of a noble. He asked Xiao if he desired to possess an estate like his own. However, the blacksmith interjected, asserting that Xiao was already his apprentice and a talented artisan, questioning the knight's motives for wanting to turn him into a knight. The knight requested that the blacksmith remain calm and emphasized that the noble profession of a knight should not be compared to the business of a blacksmith. He argued that many people dream of becoming knights, despite the dangers they face, as it is through pain and suffering that true knighthood is achieved. The knight expressed certainty that Xiao's talent would enable him to pass the knight's test and become a great knight. The argument between the knight and the blacksmith continued, leaving Xiao contemplating the knight's proposition. Although the opportunity to become a noble and acquire land enticed him, Xiao realized that it would involve engaging in warfare, which contradicted his desire for a peaceful life. Reflecting on his past life, Xiao concluded that he should live as long as possible and avoid the perils of war. He intervened in the argument, bowing to the knight and expressing gratitude for the offer but declining due to his commitment to the blacksmith. While the knight was disappointed, he assured Xiao that the offer would stand if he ever changed his mind. The blacksmith was surprised by Xiao's response, realizing that his disciple valued the life of an artisan over fame and glory. The blacksmith laughed and requested that Xiao and the other apprentices demonstrate their skills to the knight. The apprentice volunteered to showcase his talent by handling a heavy ball, impressing the knight with his strength and proficiency. The knight examined the sword the apprentice had crafted, praising its quality, weight, balance, and sharpness. The sword successfully passed the test and proved its suitability for battle. The knight commended the blacksmith on their achievement. The blacksmith, in turn, acknowledged that the apprentice may not possess extraordinary talent but emphasized the importance of his hard work in the field of blacksmithing. The knight proposed that the blacksmith assign their second apprentice to him, as he now had a worthy successor. However, the blacksmith firmly rejected the idea, urging the knight not to entertain such fantasies. Meanwhile, they noticed that Xiao had disappeared from sight. Xiao stood silently in the corner of the room, hands behind his back, expressing his lack of interest in creating anything that day. This surprised both the blacksmith and the knight, who questioned his intentions. The knight began to admonish Xiao In, warning him that failure to present something impressive could result in dire consequences. To their astonishment, Xiao In revealed a broken sword, declaring his intention to restore the magical weapon. He explained that it had been entrusted to him by his teacher. The knight was taken aback, questioning the blacksmith about his ability to forge magic weapons. The blacksmith confirmed that the sword had also been given to him by his teacher but expressed regret that he lacked the skills to repair it. The knight was thrilled and asked Xiao In if he could truly mend a broken weapon. Xiao In responded by stating his desire to test his own abilities. The blacksmith looked upon his apprentice with pride, knowing that Xiao In possessed unwavering confidence in his skills. Xiao In began the process of repairing the weapon, heating it in the fire. However, he realized that the flame was insufficient, prompting the blacksmith to step in and take charge of the bellows, ensuring an optimal temperature. Both student and teacher worked diligently, with Xiao In contemplating his extensive practice and assuring himself that everything would turn out fine, despite it being his first time restoring a magical weapon in reality. As the temperature rose within the fire, the color of the sword started to change. Xiao In retrieved something unknown from his pocket, surprising the blacksmith. Xiao In explained that it was a fragment from a magic book, which he had deemed necessary for the process. The blacksmith was incredulous, as the magic book held great value. Xiao In justified his decision, explaining that without a magic item, one cannot utilize mental spirit power on a magic weapon. Taking a kneeling position, Xiao In began gathering mental spirit power around him, infusing it into the magic sword. Patterns formed on the weapon as the mental spirit power was absorbed. With each swing of the hammer, Xiao In envisioned a future where he would no longer be confined to his current circumstances. He imagined himself as a horse-riding adventurer traversing vast landscapes, and then as a wizard, engrossed in his studies in a magical tower. Xiao In yearned to progress further and explore the realms of magic, envisioning a future where he held the entire world in his hands. The individual made a firm decision to become the most powerful magician. They continued forging a magic sword with their hammer, carefully examining it to identify any obstructions to the flow of magic. After a brief inspection, they successfully located the obstacle and used their mental abilities to clear the path, completing the forging process. They imbued the sword with the power of the magic spirit, successfully restoring it. The knight and the blacksmith approached the sword, filled with awe, and the knight inquired if the individual had succeeded. Standing together near the sword, the three of them gazed at it intently. The individual directed their mental power into the sword, causing it to glow brightly, momentarily blinding the blacksmith and the knight. With unwavering confidence, the individual took the sword in their hand, proudly declaring that they had restored it. The knight, delighted, eagerly held the sword and marveled at its brilliance, feeling a tinge of bitterness that their own abilities were limited to swordsmanship and beyond the realm of magic. Passing the sword to the blacksmith, the knight asked for their opinion. The blacksmith, carefully examining the sword, asked not to be mocked, and with tears in their eyes, praised the apprentice's remarkable talent in repairing a magic sword, reminiscing about their deceased teacher. The blacksmith inquired if the sword had the ability to unleash magic, and the individual extended their hand, revealing the magic core, explaining that it should work once inserted into the sword's hilt. The blacksmith swung the sword, activating its ability, and a powerful magic shot erupted from the tip, creating a hole in the forge's front wall. Shocked, the blacksmith and the knight observed the damage caused by the shot. The individual, smiling, asked the knight if they had passed the test, eliciting a twitch in the knight's eyes. Overwhelmed by what they witnessed, the knight enthusiastically praised the individual, affirming that they had indeed passed the test. Concerned, the blacksmith anxiously questioned their apprentice about mastering magic since they had inserted the magic core into the sword. Awkwardly, the apprentice looked at their teacher and confirmed that they had indeed mastered it. Once again amazed by the apprentice, the knight explained that, according to the country's rules, since they had mastered magic, they could join the country's magic tower for training. The knight asked if the apprentice would agree to such terms, and the apprentice, feigning ignorance, asked about the magic tower. The knight proceeded to explain that while their country had few mages, there was an esteemed 5-star mage and 5 other mages, each with their own magic tower. As a citizen of the country, the guy had an opportunity to become a mage and receive his own magic tower for learning magic. The guy was filled with excitement. The blacksmith placed a hand on the guy's shoulder and praised him, pleasantly surprised to discover that the guy was not only a genius in craftsmanship but also possessed talent in magic. The boy looked sadly at his teacher, and the blacksmith knelt down, placing the sword in the lad's hands. He expressed his awareness of the boy's efforts, his immense pride, and his respect for whatever choice the boy made. The knight advised the boy to carefully consider his decision before leaving. As the knight was about to depart, he looked at the magic sword and encouraged the lad to contemplate which profession was more respected and held a brighter future. The boy agreed and promised to think it over, observing the knight's unwavering gaze on the magic sword. The boy suggested that the knight give it a try, and the knight instantly agreed, expressing his willingness to test it out. With a smile on his face, the knight raised the sword above his head and energetically swung it in all directions, accompanied by self-muttered battle cries. The knight's enthusiasm surprised both the boy and the blacksmith, revealing a side of his character they hadn't seen before. After concluding the sword test, the blushing knight requested that the boy not look at him in that manner. He then invited the lad to accompany him to Louie's castle in 3 days. The boy agreed, but he couldn't help feeling overwhelmed by the rapid development of events. The knight instructed the guy to pack his belongings as they would be leaving for Louie Castle in 3 days. The lad requested to return home and inform his father about the situation. The knight assured him that it wouldn't be a problem and that they would visit the lad's village together to meet his father. Grateful, the boy thanked the knight. Upon arriving at the village, they were greeted by a crowd, including the lad's father and Joey's aunt. The lad warmly greeted his father, and Knight Stockton invited the lad's father and Joey's aunt to his mansion, causing a stir in the entire village. The lad and his father became the main topic of conversation among the villagers. The guy then went to visit Alice, and she hugged him tightly. It was Alice who had suggested showcasing the guy's talent for magic to Mr. Stockton, and she was overjoyed when the plan succeeded. After returning to the manor from the village, the lad bid farewell to his teacher. Everyone from the forge found it difficult to see him leave, and it was the first time the boy witnessed teacher Vanel crying. The teacher gave him the hammer that had been bestowed upon him by the master as a memento, even though he might not use it in the future. As someone who had been transported to this world, the boy felt like a stranger at first, but after spending so much time with everyone, he couldn't bear to leave them. As he left the manor, the boy watched the sunset and made a promise to himself that he would undoubtedly become a mage for the sake of all his loved ones. After 3 days of traveling, they found themselves caught in the rain. Walking through the rain in the middle of a field, the knight ordered his warriors to set up camp for the night. After setting up camp, everyone retreated to their chambers. The knight took the lad into his chamber and asked how he was feeling, knowing it was his first time traveling out of town. The lad replied that he was very tired. In response, the knight provided him with a chair to sit on and reassured him that they had 5 more days to go, asking him to wait a little longer as he would gradually adapt and get used to it. The lad, while resting in the chamber, asked the knight why he didn't take off his armor and if he was tired. The knight explained that he still had patrols to do and had been wearing the armor for 20 years, so he was already accustomed to it. Before going on patrol, the knight urged the lad to rest. The lad, feeling grateful, took out his magic sword and thanked the knight for taking care of him. As a token of his gratitude, he offered the sword as a gift. However, the knight, abiding by the laws of the country, refused the gift, stating that it was his duty to protect the citizens and accompany the lad. He added that the magic sword was very valuable and should be kept by someone like Xiaoyin. The lad was surprised by the knight's honesty, as he had previously doubted his reliability and only wanted to test him. Despite the rejection, the lad insisted and extended the sword to the knight, emphasizing that as an artisan, the knight could restore and create magical weapons. He also mentioned that he would become a mage, and his weapon would be a wand, making the sword more suitable for the knight. Convinced, the knight accepted the sword, expressing gratitude and promising to treasure it. The lad then mentioned that once he mastered his new skills, he would incorporate some magic into the knight's armor, which the knight agreed to. Afterward, the knight left for patrol, wearing his goggles, and lay down on the bed in his chamber. He began practicing with the patterns in the drawing, immersing himself in his training. Suddenly, he heard Alice calling his name, and when he asked her what was wrong, he noticed her panic. Alice urged him to wake up quickly, sensing someone outside his tent. The lad snapped back to reality and felt the presence of someone entering his tent. Reacting swiftly, He reached into his sack and retrieved the hammer given to him by his teacher. Determined not to remain passive, he gathered his will into a fist and confronted the stranger. The lad launched an attack, using his hammer to clash with the stranger's dagger. A battle ensued between the two, during which the lad caught a glimpse of the stranger's face and realized that he had never seen this man before. The stranger managed to kick the lad away and launched a counterattack with his dagger. Though the lad lacked defensive abilities, he relied on his instincts and remembered a technique from his morning stretching routine. With a somersault dodge, the lad evaded the stranger's attack, catching him off guard. Despite not knowing the identity of the stranger, the lad was determined not to lose. With a swing of his hammer, he courageously lunged at the stranger. However, in the midst of the skirmish, the lad's vision blurred, causing him to miss his target. Taking advantage of the opening, the stranger quickly repositioned himself behind the lad, pointing his sharp dagger at him. At that moment, the lad felt a surge of something familiar, causing his face to pale. It was a feeling he recognized as the aura of death. The dagger blade came dangerously close to him, but he refused to accept his fate. With a great exertion of mental force, he started gathering air on his fingertip, compressing it into a concentrated bullet. In an instant, he fired the compressed air directly into the stranger's forehead, piercing his skull. The lad's body began to tremble as he stared at his bloodied hands, realizing he had just taken a life. The sounds of the battle reverberated throughout the camp, triggering the alarm. A knight rushed into the lad's room, finding him groaning and crawling on the floor. Concerned, the knight asked what had happened. The lad, still shaken, swung his hammer without looking, but the knight quickly intervened, stopping him. The knight knelt down, embracing the lad, urging him not to worry. Confused and troubled, the lad muttered to himself, while the knight continued to offer comfort. Eventually, the lad explained that a stranger had sneaked into his room, and in his panic, he resorted to using magic when he couldn't defeat the intruder. The lad questioned the knight about whether he had really hurt someone and why someone would want to kill him. The knight offered apologies, suggesting that the stranger had likely mistaken their targets. He speculated that the assassin's true target was the knight himself, and the lad had been caught in the crossfire. The knight admitted that he didn't know who had sent the assassin. Curious about the motive behind the assassination attempt, the lad asked the knight if he had any enemies or if someone held a grudge against him. The knight sighed heavily, unsure if he should disclose the information. He asked the lad if he had seen the size of his estate and territory, emphasizing its vastness. The lad affirmed that the grounds were indeed extensive and could potentially accommodate thousands of people if a farm were added. In response, the knight suggested that the lad go outside for some fresh air, so he wouldn't have to remain near a dead man walking. Under the night sky, the lad and the knight gazed upward. The lad pondered the knight's question about the strangeness of his ownership of such a large land without any honors. Sitting on the ground, the knight began to recount his life from 50 years ago when his land was nothing but abandoned and valueless. It was impossible to cultivate crops on such barren soil. He shared that his father, a brilliant knight, had brought the townspeople together to work on reclaiming the land with great effort. Through their hard work, they eventually established their estate. Intrigued, the lad asked how his father had accomplished the reclamation if the soil quality was so poor. The knight responded by asking the lad to keep it a secret, to which the lad agreed. Looking up at the sky, the knight revealed that magic played a significant role. He explained that his father, as Count Cambert's subordinate, had sought the aid of the great magician, Shoni, who used magic to invent a farming method that could transform the soil quality. Count Cambert had instructed the lad's father to try out the cultivation method on their land. After 10 years of hard work by his father and the people, they began to see some achievements. The lad was overjoyed, realizing that their efforts had transformed them into the food storehouse for the entire country. The knight smiled and remarked on the lad's father's knowledge and caring nature, which had undoubtedly influenced the lad's talents. The knight explained to the lad that there were people who spoke ill of them out of jealousy and envy. These individuals were greedy and desired to appropriate all the gains for themselves. They resorted to hiring assassins and other actions to achieve their goals. The lad contemplated their motives, surmising that their aim was not just glory and achievements, but to seize control of all the lands. The lad questioned why they didn't seek help from Earl Cambert, given that they had come under his orders. The knight clarified that low-ranking nobles like them were obligated to make offerings and pay taxes to higher-ranking nobles. As a result, the higher-ranking nobles would not protect them. The knight lamented that if Count Cambert were alive, they wouldn't have to worry about this problem. The lad inquired about Earl Cambert's successor and why they couldn't rely on them for support. The knight explained that Earl Cambert had taught the Duke of Warrington, who respected him. However, Earl Cambert's son, Earl Fraser, was too weak to influence the Duke's decisions. Without Earl Cambert's support, the higher-ranking nobles began attacking their subordinates and taking away their achievements. The knight emphasized the need to keep this information secret because if it became known that someone was trying to take over another noble's lands, the other nobles would swiftly eliminate the upstart. The knight expressed his temptation to hide and live a normal life, but as the lord of the manor, he had a responsibility to protect his family and the families of his citizens. The lad proposed a solution, suggesting that he could go to the magic tower and ask the great mage, Tony, to protect the lord. The lord was hopeful and asked if the lad would truly do it. The lad assured him that he would fulfill his promise and mentioned that none of their enemies could afford to insult the great mage, Shoni, as he was one of the 6 great mages. The lad further stated that if the nobles refused to help, they could seek the support of Grand Mage Tony, which should resolve all their problems. The lord, filled with hope, listened to the lad's words and sat on the grass, contemplating the potential resolution to their struggles. The lord hesitated and questioned why a great mage would care about a lowly knight. The lad confessed to the lord that he had learned magic on his own, using a magic book given to him by his teacher, Vanel. The lad asked the lord if his ability to comprehend magic in a short time would attract the attention of a great mage. The lord inquired why the lad would do so much for him, to which the lad looked up at the sky thoughtfully and replied that he had never considered it before. With a smile, he expressed that the lord seemed like a very good person, and he simply wanted to help him. Overwhelmed with emotion, the lord embraced the lad and tears streamed down his face. Awkwardly, realizing that his motives were primarily self-serving, the lord berated himself for his own uselessness, as he needed to use the lad for protection. However, the lad reassured the lord that there was nothing wrong with their arrangement. In this world, everyone related to the lad, including his family and friends, resided within the lord's estate. The lad didn't want them to become sacrificial tools of war. The lord and the lad conversed throughout the night, and at dawn, they continued on their journey. A week had passed since the incident with the assassin, and they were now approaching Louie Castle. As the castle appeared on the horizon, they anticipated a little more safety upon entering its grounds. Passing through the mountains, the castle became increasingly visible, and they finally reached its entrance. Inside the castle grounds, the lad inquired about the number of people residing in the castle. The lord recalled that about 2 years ago, there were approximately 100,000 people, but now there must be even more. The lad was delighted to see so many people within the castle. The lord explained that it was more like a city than a castle, but it had been named Louie Castle by the dukes. Over time, the town had expanded significantly, becoming 10 times its previous size. Everything became clear to the lad, as he had previously wondered why they were heading to the castle. Sitting at the edge of the carriage, the lad observed the bustling surroundings, realizing that this small town was better suited for a peaceful life compared to his previous world. The lord showed the lad the place where they would be staying, and upon opening the door, the lord called out to the butler inside. It turned out to be a bar, and the men drinking inside noticed the lord's presence. Startled, the bartender, who was standing behind the bar wiping a glass, stared at the lord. Unexpectedly, the bartender was Butler, an old friend of the lord. Butler stepped out from behind the bar to greet the lord, but as he approached, he assumed a fighting stance and swung his fist. The lord swiftly dodged the attack, and Butler grabbed his arm, interrupting the counterattack. They greeted each other with a firm handshake, their exchange of blows being a friendly reunion. The lad felt relieved, knowing that the lord and Butler were old friends, and their physical confrontation was amicable. They continued their introductions, and the lad greeted Butler's uncle, who was also present in the bar. Xiao-in asked the apprentice if he was familiar with Butler. The apprentice replied that Butler is Lord Stockton's childhood friend and Wynn's teacher since childhood. They share a strong bond as best friends. Butler greeted them and asked if Xiao-in had come to the castle to take the novice tinker's test. Butler examined the first apprentice and praised their physical fitness. Then he noticed Xiao-in and inquired if he was truly Lord Stockton's grandson. Xiao-in greeted Butler, and Lord Stockton introduced Xiao-in as the son of a farmer in his territory with a talent for magic. Lord Stockton expressed his desire for Xiao-in to enter the magic tower to study. Butler proceeded to examine Xiao-in, who initially doubted he would be believed. Butler laughed heartily and acknowledged the presence of many talented individuals in their area, citing Winnell as an example of a mage apprentice. Butler suggested that the boys take some rest after their long journey and entrusted the luggage to him. Lord Stockton and Butler remained in the bar, enjoying their drinks. Lord Stockton recounted their experiences on the road, expressing that the Duke's patience seemed to be wearing thin. Butler inquired about any other suspicious movements, but Lord Stockton stated that there was no further incident and believed that the assassin's attack was a final warning. Butler questioned Lord Stockton on his next course of action, mentioning the grim potential outcome if the situation persisted. Lord Stockton revealed his plan to send Xiao-in to the magic tower, hoping that success as a magician's apprentice would deter any further threats to his territory. Butler posed a hypothetical scenario where Xiao-in doesn't succeed, and Lord Stockton replied that their only hope rested in Xiao-in. Lord Stockton emphasized the need to protect their territory, as it was their home, and he would not allow anyone to destroy it. The next day, while having breakfast, Xiao-in asked Lord Stockton if they had received a response from the Magical Association yet. Lord Stockton, chewing on a piece of bread, replied that they would likely receive the letter in 3 days, acknowledging the slow delivery. Xiao-in mentioned the possibility of using a tailwind, a type of magic that could expedite item delivery. Lord Stockton asked for an explanation of tailwind, and Xiao-in explained its concept. Lord Stockton turned to the apprentice and mentioned that he should be able to pass the artisan's test quickly, providing an opportunity for the exam in a few days. The apprentice expressed gratitude to Lord Stockton. After breakfast, Lord Stockton and the boys went to the city, strolling through the bustling streets. Xiao-in reflected on how, in his past life, he might not have been able to venture outside for several years. Xiao-in noticed a street vendor and questioned why they still existed in Castle Louie. Lord Stockton responded that street vendors could be found in any city, and sometimes valuable items could be discovered if one was cautious and fortunate. Lord Stockton began sharing stories of his city adventures with Xiao-in, who listened attentively. Xiao-in pondered if Lord Stockton had brought them to the city for nostalgic reasons. While exploring the city, Xiao-in's attention was drawn to an intriguing piece of iron on a street vendor's counter, resembling grimoire plates he had encountered before. The boy gestured for the Lord to stop puppy eyes and asked him to purchase something he needed for his magic. The Lord, in response, happily agreed to buy the item the lad desired. As they approached the street vendor, Xiao-in, putting on an innocent appearance, carefully examined all the items in the shop. The vendor, with a slight smile, asked Xiao-in what he was looking for. Xiao-in pointed to the grimoire plates and inquired about their nature. After a moment of thought, the merchant replied that they were treasures he had found while exploring ruins, and he complained about the effort required to obtain them. The Lord asked the merchant how much he wanted for the iron plates, and the merchant offered to sell all his treasures on the counter for just 1 gold coin. The Lord, realizing the merchant's attempt to deceive the young boy, grabbed him by the collar and negotiated a price of 5 silver coins for the entire collection. The merchant agreed to the Lord's offer, and Xiao-in, with a satisfied smile, carried a bag filled with the acquired items. The apprentice asked Xiao-in why he wanted to buy all these things since they weren't worth 5 silver pieces, realizing they had been swindled by the merchant. Xiao-in continued walking with a smile, and the apprentice commented that Xiao-in made the Lord spend a significant amount of money, to which the Lord responded that it wasn't much and wouldn't make him poorer in any way. The apprentice then asked Xiao-in to reveal what he truly intended to buy from all those items. Looking around to ensure privacy, Xiao-in asked the apprentice to come closer and whispered something about magic in his ear. While listening, the apprentice was taken aback by what he heard but managed to contain his emotions. The Lord suggested returning to the hostel, and once there, Xiao-in showed the apprentice what he really wanted to buy, 2 grimoire plates. Xiao-in explained that these iron plates held magical properties, and the apprentice examined them, discovering patterns on the plates. Confirmed that there was definitely magical information within them and expressed a desire to research it. The Lord praised them, and the apprentice asked about the actual price of these magical records. The Lord replied that anything related to magic is difficult to buy with money and mentioned that each plate could be sold for at least 100 gold coins if someone were to sell them to the magic tower. The apprentice was astonished by the value he heard. The Lord then instructed the apprentice not to disturb Xiao-in and sent him off to study for the exam. Xiao-in looked at the grimoire plates, aware that their true value exceeded 100 gold coins. Holding one of the plates, he could sense a trace of magical power and became curious about the information contained within or whether it was a form of mental training method. The guy attempted to utilize his mental spirit power and infuse it into the plate. After a moment, he abruptly flung the plate away from him, experiencing intense pain in his heart. Overwhelmed by the sensation, he collapsed to the floor, bewildered by the unfamiliar feeling. His head throbbed, and his heart felt like it was about to burst. Realizing the urgency of the situation, the guy made a decision to enter the virtual space. Reaching into his bag, he retrieved the virtual glasses, knowing that Alice awaited him there, ready to assist. In the virtual space, Alice guided the guy to a bunk after analyzing his condition. She discovered that his body temperature had risen, his breathing was rapid, and his heart was under immense strain. The guy's self-healing abilities kicked in, but Alice explained to him that before utilizing his mental spirit power, he should have allowed her to scan the magic plates. In his half-dead state, the guy recounted to Alice how when he used his mental spirit power to touch the magic plate, it felt as though he was being drawn inside it, and all his mental power was drained into the plate. Alice remarked that the guy had overestimated himself, and the effects he experienced were due to a lack of mental fortitude. Any mistake in this process could have resulted in his demise. Contemplating Alice's words, she simplified the concept of mental fortitude for the guy, explaining that it represented the magical power of their world, akin to his soul. If all of his mental spirit power were drained, it would be akin to having his soul sucked out, rendering him a mindless being. Reflecting on the gravity of the situation, the guy pushed the plate away and expressed gratitude to Alice for her swift reaction, which averted a catastrophe. Curious about how he could study the two iron plates, the guy inquired further. Alice scanned the plates and informed him that they appeared to contain high-level information. Given his current level of mental fortitude, he wouldn't be able to comprehend the content. Additionally, it would take him approximately another year to master them if he continued to progress. Upon learning the time required, the guy expressed his frustration. Alice reassured him, stating that time would pass quickly. Xiao-in recalled a previous encounter when an assassin attacked him, and Alice mentioned sensing killing intent. The guy asked if her information storage data was destroyed, to which Alice replied that the basic information was lost, but the special information remained intact. Intrigued, the guy sought to understand the nature of the special information, but Alice dismissed his inquiry, stating that he wouldn't comprehend it anyway. Growing even more curious, the guy persisted, prompting Alice to question why he suddenly desired to learn how to sense killing intent. The guy lowered his gaze and confessed that since encountering the assassin, he felt defenseless. Despite being within the virtual space, where he couldn't die, he had forgotten that in the real world, he was an ordinary person. If Alice hadn't informed him about the assassin previously, Xiao-in would have perished without ever discovering the imminent danger. Recognizing that he couldn't rely on Alice to warn him every time he faced a threat, Xiao-in expressed the need to develop his ability to sense killing intent for his own safety. Though reluctant, Alice eventually agreed to the guy's suggestion. Filled with unwavering confidence, projected a door, urging him to enter and experience what lay beyond. Additionally, Alice provided him with a lamp as a token. Approaching the door, the guy inquired about its contents, prompting Alice to encourage him to find out for himself. As he opened the door and entered the room, he found himself in an unfamiliar environment. Startled by some sounds, he screamed, disoriented and unaware of his surroundings. Suddenly, his body became paralyzed, and he felt a chilling sensation down his spine. Behind him stood a massive man wielding an axe, who struck at him. The guy managed to evade the attack by jumping backward, bewildered by the audacity of the surprise assault. Pointing his finger at the assailant, he prepared to use bullet magic, only to realize that his magic was rendered useless. Fleeing from the man, the guy found temporary refuge in a nearby house, aware that it would only momentarily halt the axe-wielding threat. Desperate for a weapon, he searched the house and noticed a peculiar statue of a man's head on a table. Continuing his search, he came across a television broadcasting static, which suddenly displayed a broadcast featuring a doll inviting him to play a game. Disturbed, he moved away from the TV and encountered a closet with rustling noises emanating from within. Already filled with fear from his previous encounters, the guy hesitated to imagine what could be inside. Suddenly, an axe blade narrowly missed him as the man with the axe finally caught up to him. Overwhelmed by fear, Xiao-in fainted, and when he regained consciousness, he found himself lying on the floor next to Alice. Confused about what had transpired, he questioned Alice, who explained that she had transported him to the training room to enhance his ability to sense killing intent. Anxiously, Alice inquired about the progress of his training, whether his capacity to detect killing intent had improved. Placing his hand on his head, the guy admitted that he didn't know. He queried Alice about the necessity of such terrifying experiences to train his sense of killing intent. Alice responded that it was crucial for him to encounter fear and danger in order to develop the ability to sense another person's killing intent and latent hostility. This required exposure to a frightening and hazardous environment, thus explaining why she had placed him in that room. Concerned about potential harm, the guy asked if this method was truly safe. Alice assured him that her database contained over 100 billion reports with consistent results, indicating that individuals who underwent similar experiences felt a heightened awareness and were able to recognize approaching danger. She further explained that in her database, there were no reports of fatalities among federal military personnel who were required to undergo similar training before joining the military. Curious about other federal levels and their quantity, the guy inquired further. Alice clarified that federal servicemen originated from the Milky Way galaxy, but the general data had been destroyed, leaving her with no additional information. The guy, eager for interesting information, became frustrated when he couldn't find it. He quickly got back on his feet and expressed his intention to continue practicing. Alice, concerned, asked where he was rushing off to and suggested that he rest for a while. However, the guy confidently opened the door to the training room, stating that he was perfectly fine and needed to seize the opportunity to learn how to sense killing intent. He believed that the sooner he acquired this skill, the safer he would be. Observing the guy's determination, Alice was unsure of what to say. The guy entered the room, and Alice recalled that while there were no reported deaths after training, over 50 individuals had gone insane. She assumed that since the guy didn't inquire about it, he probably didn't want to know. 5 days passed, and Lord Stockton received a return letter from the Duke, bringing him great joy. In anticipation, Lord Stockton eagerly opened the letter. He then went to Xiao In's house and knocked on the door, shouting that the magic tower had finally responded. Without waiting for a response, Lord Stockton decided to enter the room. As he crossed the threshold, he saw Xiao In sleeping. Approaching him, Lord Stockton attempted to wake him up, causing Xiao In to instantly jump off the bed, pointing a loaded bullet at Lord Stockton. The Lord was frightened and pleaded not to be killed. Xiao In apologized, explaining that he had mistaken Lord Stockton for someone else. Lord Stockton, still shaken, struggled to stand. Xiao In never expected that his ability to sense killing intent would be so acute that he could detect someone approaching even while he was asleep. After calming down, Lord Stockton presented a letter stating that the magic tower had responded. He informed Xiao In that there was a mage willing to test his magical talent, which made Xiao In very happy. Xiao In asked Lord Stockton when they would leave, and Lord Stockton replied that they would depart immediately. While riding the horse, Xiao In asked Lord Stockton why the magic tower was located outside the city. Lord Stockton laughed and explained that mages formed a separate caste and naturally desired a place where they could study magic in peace. He mentioned that they were nearing the tower and asked Xiao In to look at the horizon, where a large magic tower stood. Xiao In was surprised by its size, realizing why it was built outside the city.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content. Feel free to leave a comment down below sharing your thoughts or suggestions. If you want to stay updated on all our latest uploads, click the notification bell icon. And hey, why not check out some of our other videos popping up on the screen right now? If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really means a lot. Peace.